Welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. Drop your name or where you're calling in from in the chat. We're looking forward to meeting you all. I hope you've got your coffee, your tea, your cocktail, whatever you need to just be in this space in this moment. We'll get started in just a sec.
Oh, good evening.
Hi, so great to see you. Well, I think what's going to happen right now is Marie is going to say, Dr. Walker, please introduce our amazing guest that we have for tonight's webinar. But what I love is that we agreed that we would make this a conversation and not a lecture, but a conversation, and leave time, of course, for the people that have joined us to ask the questions that they may have as well. So perhaps I'll start by introducing myself and then a little bit about Birthing the Magic. And then I'll turn it over to you to do a quick introduction of yourself as well. So good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dr. Valencia Walker, and I am the president of Birthing the Magic Collaborative. So along with Mrs. Marie Boone Clark, we spent a lot of time talking about more, and that one, we are already more than enough, but we need access to more to be able to empower ourselves as we go through every single part of the birthing journey. And a lot of people only focus on the pregnancy, but what we understand is there's so much more wrapped around that. And so we're excited to be here today because as a part of all that's wrapped around it, we have to talk about some things that sometimes we don't like to talk about with other people. And so that's why I'm excited to have you here today, Dr. Alicia. And please just take a moment to introduce yourself, and then I'll tell you all the things that I admire about the magic that you possess.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I agree. I was very excited to have a conversation and really hopefully say some things that resonate with everyone. My name is Dr. Alicia Hodge. I'm a psychologist. I have a virtual practice, but I also engage in lots of things like speaking and workshops and retreats. I primarily work with women who are looking to remember who they are and want to put down perfectionism, manage anxiety, and beat the cycle of burnout. Oh, I think you're muted.
Ouch. I said, ouch. Maybe that's why I was muted. So you couldn't hear my ouch. I was like, wait, we're putting down perfectionism? Oh, okay.
Yes, it is. It's heavy to carry. It's hard to put down, but once you put it down, you have a lot more room to carry other things.
Are we also talking about how we carry things for other people as a
That is
part of our
included. Yeah,
perfectionism? Okay.
definitely included.
I wanted to see if we're going to get all the ouches in tonight. Well, of course, I love that you are a beautiful, intelligent, incredible Black woman. I love that you have a HBCU connection. I'm a FAMU grad. Bowie State for
Yeah.
you. Ooh,
Bowie State. Yep.
almost messed up. I caught myself. Bowie State for you.
Okay.
Not only that, you are grounded in both your lived experience, but of course, you have all the credentials, the BA, the
Mhm.
master's, the PhD. Not that you need your credentials to lead, because I think your authenticity is what shines through and resonated with me. But we also recognize, okay, I recognize that often when I walk into spaces, I have to wear my credentials almost
Mhm.
like armor. And that's heavy too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. I
I
think
think,
it's a nice justification sometimes, right? That I'm not just saying things that I think, but I actually research them. And at times, you're right. It is, an, I have to use it to defend what I say.
mhm, absolutely.
Yeah.
I hear you and I see you. Well, before people are like, they're just having a whole conversation, aren't they? We said that we wanted to structure this around finding calm in chaos. And I think there are a lot of different ways to think about that phrase, but maybe I want to give you a couple of minutes to create some boundaries and create some shared language that we'll use tonight as we're talking.
Yeah. And so I think that there may be some things that as we go along that please feel free to ask if you're not familiar with the term. I'm aware that certain terms have different connotations. And ultimately, I think part of what I think is going to be important about this conversation is the power of perspective, meaning things mean what you believe they mean.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about shared language, I think even the idea of calm, right? I think that brings up a connotation for lots of people. Some people imagine calm being alone. Some people it involves silence. Other people it might actually involve something that somebody else might call chaos. Um, and so I think ultimately what we're trying to establish today is a focus on ourselves and how and when we touch base with ourselves, when we can ground ourselves and be in touch with ourselves as a safe space, then we can sort of access to what we need to give. I think a lot of us are giving from
Mhm.
a space of deficit. And often at times, that is actually what is creating the chaos, or messages that we give ourselves are creating the chaos. But truthfully, I think, as we discussed before, there's some actual legitimate, realistic chaos going on around us right now. And so I think that's important to address.
Absolutely. Well, I said one of the things I wanted to do is perhaps start from a place of transparency. And maybe there might be some aspects of my story and my identity that might resonate with others. And I just want to let everyone know who's listening that you can type questions and comments, into the chat, or also we have a Q&A function that we'll continue to monitor throughout, as well as leaving time for taking questions at the end. So let's just say I might be a Black woman currently living in the United States of America.
Mhm.
And my positionality, I grew up in somewhat of a small town in the deep South. Ooh, I'm middle-aged now, which means I've lived through some things,
Yeah.
that have happened in our society. I didn't live through the civil rights movement, but I lived in a lot of the repercussions, particularly the war on drugs, and then the compassionate approach to opioid addiction. I was a nerdy, smart little kid, had an opportunity to go off to college, FAMU, that's what's up. But, I then decided to go to medical school. And going from one environment that was incredibly affirming into an environment that I didn't really have an immediate person at the time that I could talk to prepare me to tell me what to expect. And I had the real struggles of, how do I pay the rent? How do I get food to eat? And still expected to show up every day and be my best. And a lot of other things happened along the way. And I continued, though, to go through my training. I had the opportunity to train at a prominent children's hospital. And the program that I did was one of the top 5 in the country. And then, remember I said I'm a nerd, joined an academic environment, started teaching, started taking care of patients.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of different realities that happen along the way. And it's a huge responsibility to have someone's life in your hands. There's an expectation that you are supposed to be perfect. If you make a mistake, things go badly, very badly. But there are also the people that think I'm a DEI hire and that maybe I need a Black job. So having to show up every day, trying to prove by the way I look, by the way of my dress, is my hair straight enough, which I miss my locks, because that was definitely I'm showing up and you will get my hair just like it grows out of my head, which actually this is how my hair grows out of my head, but I do miss my locks.
Yeah.
But it was a lot to carry, right? The assumptions that I'm not the one in charge, the assumptions that maybe I don't know what I'm doing, the burden of wanting to do right for my patients, especially the patients that look like me, that look differently.
Yeah. I think it's a lot to carry. I too have felt some of those things, particularly around the repercussions of not doing something the right way. And I think a lot of times we're fighting a lot of messages in society, right? As a double minority, as you discussed, and then adding all the other layers on top of it. And I find that when I'm talking to different people, I think it's important to realize that two things exist at the same time, meaning there are certain standards and expectations and assumptions. And then I'm oftentimes redirecting people back to themselves, which sounds straightforward, but is very difficult when you're sifting through the opinions of others, the voices from your past, the things that people told you that you ought to be or that you weren't going to be. Um, and ultimately, I think, right, the way that that connects back to the general message of today is, how do I find the calm, safe space, acknowledging that there's a lot of chaos around me? And I wish there was one easy answer. I would be a billionaire if there was. But I think ultimately, the idea is that, how do I reinvest energy back into myself instead of consistently putting it outside of me, consistently putting the measurement outside of me, and consistently putting my scope of control outside of me.
I want to definitely come back to that idea of the outside of me for that validation, right? That I've done enough, I'm okay.
Mhm.
But one of the things we talked about as we were thinking about this conversation, I told you that I didn't recognize it as anxiety. I didn't recognize chaos because it was normalized around me. This is just how it is. This is how we
Mhm.
function in this space.
Mhm.
And I told you one of the things I used to do is I used to hum. And I
Yeah.
noticed that when I was really working hard and trying to get it all done and get literally, how do I get it all done? I would just hum. And you had a
Mhm.
really like fascinating take on that that I
Okay.
wasn't aware of.
Yeah. So, what I will point out, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, like you mentioned with anxiety. So, anxiety is a very natural, normal emotion that we all experience. So, for example, if I chose somebody off of the participant list and said, I'm going to unmute you, I want you to introduce yourself, more than likely everyone would sit up and be like, oh my gosh, I hope it's not me. And so that is a small dose of anxiety and it's useful, right? It kind of gets you serious, you pay attention. It is important for me to remember all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I need to go pick up my daughter before aftercare closes. What happens is that sometimes we are experiencing this disproportion at a disproportionate level, meaning the reaction and response we're having does not match the experience or the situation. So, for example, it is smart for me to maybe feel paralysis or extreme fear at the thought of a loose dog, but not an email,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Do you get the emails I get?
this is true. It depends. You might have some emails that warrant that. But I think ultimately, right, we may be existing in a manner that we recognize to be normal, but it may fall out of a normative range. And so when I'm talking about anxiety in a way that is negatively impacting you, we are referring to basic physical symptoms like shortness of breath or noticing that your heart is racing, difficulty concentrating. Sometimes we'll see stomach upset issues. So, um, low appetite or a really upset stomach, difficulty sleeping. But also, we talked about there might be some little small symptoms of anxiety that people notice, which is um, difficulty catching their breath or having like a slight dry cough or a lot of physical restlessness or feeling exhausted at the end of the day. And like you ran a marathon and you're like, my muscles are so tense, but I don't know why. And a lot of us may be going through this normally throughout our day and not having ease. Um, but it is in fact something that is important to address.
No, I joked about the emails, but to your point about having someone outside of you see what's happening to you,
Mhm.
I can get emails all day. It's not an issue. But that one email that I see from that one person, and all of a sudden I do this,
Yeah, yeah,
doing now. Like,
yeah,
and what's funny is I thought of that person and my head started hurting just now.
yeah.
Like not like a real headache. Um, and I think that was the other thing that we had talked about is that, well, my head doesn't hurt that bad. It's not a migraine. But to your
Mhm.
point, seeing an email from someone should not make your head hurt, like where you physically feel pain.
Yeah,
That might be a
yeah.
way that we don't recognize how anxiety shows up for us or even think of it.
Mm. Yeah, our
Yes.
bodies talk to us. I think that's important to realize. And part of what happens, I think, when we're very busy and multitasking, and even sometimes on the road to burnout, is that we're disconnected from our body. And so I like to tell people, as uncomfortable as it might be, to to come back down and check in with yourself. It is an important thing to do. And we can do that easily. We'll get into some more tips, but I think just resetting yourself really quickly through breath, taking a deep breath in and out a couple of times makes your mind connect to your body because you're thinking like, I got to relax my shoulders. I need to sit up straight. I have to make my body work. And it puts us in a place where we're listening to ourselves. Even little things. If you go through the whole day and it's 3 o'clock and you're like, I didn't eat yet, that is not normal. And I don't like to use the word normal, but I'm saying that is not normal because our body gives us cues that say, hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I need something. And if you get good at pushing that
Ignoring
away,
the
suppressing
cues.
it,
Mhm.
you're less in tune with your body.
I think that's a good point, right? That I'm hungry, but I don't have time to eat right now. Or I don't have time to drink. But then if you go all day and you haven't had to go to the bathroom, it's the same concept. I think another thing that came up for me, I didn't realize how much I clenched my teeth.
Mm, hmm.
And I don't have jaw pain, but I wasn't sleeping well. because my muscles were constantly under tension. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
I have so much to do. That's why I'm not sleeping well. Well, that might also be why I'm not sleeping well. Man, I really am telling on myself, aren't I?
Yeah. And we have a few people who even commented, you know, essentially that like they have felt these things that increased anxiety looks different for all of us, but that's why it's important. Watch your patterns. Everyone's different. I think some people know my sleep is the first thing to go. And so that's a sign. It doesn't always mean that we can fix the stress, the source of stress in our life, but it's just something to pay attention to because, as I said earlier, a big part of the work that I do really focuses on our perspectives. And so in life, we're sometimes all going through the same things, but we all react very differently based on our experiences, our support systems, our resources. And I think it is important to realize sometimes a big part of finding the calm is radically accepting that there is chaos. I
Mm.
think we try really hard to avoid chaos, to prevent chaos, to ignore chaos. But I think ultimately by acknowledging like there's chaos right now, no wonder I can't sleep. There's chaos right now. Like I really need to take care of myself instead of just saying like it's fine. I got it.
You mean the it's fine? You mean, wait, is that me not recognizing when I say, oh, it's fine, but it's not really fine?
It's like the picture of the man who's sitting at the desk in the flames and he's just smiling like it's fine.
Yeah, fine is definitely a loaded word when you hear a Black woman say it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but but I do want to spend a little bit more time because I think, again, it was very revealing to me to see all the different ways we disconnect from our body. And you talked about the saying, it's fine. The not drinking, so I haven't gone to the bathroom, it's fine. The not eating. And you talked about decreased appetite. I think some people have increased appetite.
Mhm.
And I think some people have decreased appetite and they still gain weight. And they're like, I didn't eat anything all day. How am I gaining weight? Okay, confession time again. I'm a physician. I'm supposed to know better. I genuinely do try to model good, healthy eating. I like
Mhm.
fruits and vegetables, but ooh, when I tell you I need that donut.
Yeah. Especially if you're stressed, your body's like, give me something good. Like, hit me with the snacks. Let's do some sugar. Let's do some
The snacks
carbs.
are amazing.
Yeah.
Snacks are amazing.
Yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, I didn't really have a meal, but I had a whole lot of snacks. The Jolly Rancher, the Snickers bar, the pick
Mhm.
whatever candy, the sour gummies.
Yeah.
It's quick, it's fast until I can get something to eat. But that
Yeah. And the
also
sugar
becomes
is,
the behavior, right?
yeah, it's also sort of just reinforcing. Like, the interesting thing is, it's not really paradoxical, but the way that you sort of calm down your nervous system is by slowing down, right? Which is usually the opposite of what you feel like you can do, or it's usually the opposite of what you need to do in the moment. But the reality of it is that these things are not sustainable. It is not sustainable to sleep only a couple hours a night for weeks. It is not sustainable to not eat meals. These things exacerbate your anxiety. When you're not sleeping, when you're not eating, you feel worse. And
Mhm.
so it becomes this perpetual cycle that can lead to other issues, medical issues, psychological, emotional issues. And I think oftentimes we don't hear our bodies until it is screaming. And I am a big fan of trying to get people tapped back into hearing, maybe not the whispers, right? Like it takes a refined ear. Even sometimes my body's whispering, I'm like, we're not listening to that right now. We got things to do. But right, ultimately, I have the intellectual knowledge at the very least to say things have been really tough lately. Like I need to make a concerted effort to take care of myself because I am the instrument in the
Mm.
work, and most of us are. If you have families, if you have children, if you have a team, if you even have yourself, you are the instrument. And so it is a huge and worthy investment to take care of yourself because all of the things that you feel responsible for will suffer anyways if you don't.
Okay, I'll be honest. I hear you.
Mhm.
I know that you know what you're talking about. I
Thank you.
understand. I understand. But that's all I see around me. I'm not doing
Mhm.
anything that my best friend isn't dealing with at work. I'm not doing anything that, how do I, like, it's almost like there's a, I'm not going to say misery loves company, but I'm going to say misery loves.
Mhm. Yeah, it's perpetuated by other people.
Well, I mean, because people, I mean, why you think you just kick your feet up and just take a breath?
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you, your situation isn't as bad as my situation. I mean,
right.
and then I'm like,
Mhm.
actually, you're right. Maybe
Yeah,
I need to, I mean,
step it
my
up.
ancestors
Yeah.
dealt with more than this.
Mhm.
How do you, it doesn't feel right.
Right. So what I'll say is this. I am not a fan of it could be worse. Like that sentiment because it could always be worse. I have one leg, you have none. You know, you don't have an arm, right? And so it could always be worse. And it's sort of like, when does that competition end? When I'm dead? Like I could be dead. I also believe that that is a perspective that has uh is well meaning, but it actually encourages suppression. Like you said, I'm expressing myself, I'm telling you I'm stressed, something's hard for me, and the person's like, okay, so. And so now you're teaching yourself these feelings aren't valid and our emotions don't go away just because we tell them to. They actually just say, oh, well, I'm going to stay here and build up and wait. And the next time she's upset, will come double force because now there's old emotions left over. And next time will come triple force. And maybe next time will come quadruple force. And so my perspective is it could be worse, but that's not what's important. My question typically is, but how is that working for you? Like, yeah, okay, your cousins, your sister, everybody's struggling. How is it working for you? And if it is a
Going
problem for
back
you,
to, yeah.
yeah, if it's not working for you, it's not working for you. And it may not be working for them, but they don't have an answer for you. So the best answer might be, hey, girl, put your head down and keep working like the rest of us.
So what can we, well, I have two questions I want to ask at the same
Mhm.
time. Let me, let me slow down.
Give
Take a
yourself a
breath.
moment. We're not
Yeah.
going anywhere just yet.
Okay. We don't have to rush through this. Huh.
No.
This may seem like a small thing to people sitting there, but I really am having to intentionally pause and listen
Mhm.
and slow down. And the point you just made about when we feel like we have to like speed up, and
Yeah,
maybe those are the times where it's like, actually, I need to slow down.
I don't.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
Take a breath. I did. I wanted to ask two questions. They're slightly different. Something as you were talking made me think back to what you said about the coughing or the little cough or the little giggle that seems
Mm-hmm.
out of place. I also noticed that I hold my breath and I hold my breath so much that I don't even know that I'm holding my breath. But again, this idea of being connected back to your body, especially when other people say that you're fine. Are there any ways to kind of like, how do we know if we're doing some of those tells?
Yeah. If you have someone close to you, you could actually ask. And I know that sounds like obviously straightforward, but you'd be surprised at what someone might tell you that they notice about you. I'd also say you can do things like body scan. So just randomly or prescribed. I know some people who like to put an alarm in their phone. It really depends on your personality. Do something called a body scan, which means, oop, excuse me, my alarm. You do a body scan, which means you're paying attention to different parts of your body. Like, is my tongue clenched to the roof of my mouth? Is my jaw tight? Can I make some space between my ears and my shoulders, right? Because a lot of us are at laptops or computers or we're just tense. Can I make some space? Can I wiggle my fingers? Can I wiggle my toes? Can I adjust my weight sort of like evenly in the chair. So that way I'm not tense or lean into one side.
Mhm.
In the deep breath, because that tension, right? That holding of the breath, or even sometimes women are like, I notice that I'm holding in my stomach all the time, like for appearance sake, things like that. Giving your body a chance to release. That's a lot of work, whether or not we believe it. Like we tend to feel more exhausted at the end of the day when we're going through a stressful time, not only because of mental stress, but actual physical stress. Like you're on edge. I know some people who start to notice, like, I have marks in my hands. I didn't even know I was squeezing my fists.
Mhm.
Um, and so little things like that, just take a second and head to toe. Is my body in a calm state or is it in a tense state?
I've definitely noticed that hypervigilance, especially when you're in a work environment where you don't feel like you can trust people or people are mistreating
Hmm.
you. Like you feel like you have to be on guard. Like where's the next attack
Hmm.
coming from? And yeah,
Yeah,
it's not a physical attack. No one's about to, well, see
hopefully
what
not.
happens. No one's about to like, drag me out of my office or drag me out of a clinic where I'm seeing a patient or in a hospital. But
Mhm.
when you don't know who's got your back and who doesn't, you are kind
Yeah,
of like, what does this look like? And that constant state of like extra running it through my head. Well, if I say this way,
yeah. All the engineering, like the social engineering we're trying to do. Like, I'm gonna do this, and they'll say this, and then I'll do that, and then they say this. These things are I also want to be clear, these things are necessary sometimes, right? This is about survival.
yeah,
And so one of the things I like to tell people is, can we pick an arena that we have to survive, that maybe we are unsupported in? And if we have to do that and operate it in it, when will we turn it off? When will we intentionally find time and space to replenish and restore ourselves? Because if it's something like work is a huge domain in our lives. So many hours of so many days. But I think it will be unsustainable and detrimental to carry that into my house,
I was
into
going to
my
ask the
friendships,
question next.
into my
That was the
relationships. Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
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 Um, how, if I'm struggling with me and I see somebody else struggling, how do I'm not, I want to show up for them, but maybe I've been guilty of being like the girl, you ain't going through what I'm going through. Or looking at someone else and being like, I'm going through a lot, but I promised them I would like show up. Or
Hmm.
even with kids, like, I'm so exhausted, but food still needs
Yeah.
to get on the
They
table.
need something. Hmm.
Um, and feeling guilty about that. Like, I'm trying to do better than what I saw, but this is hard. And
Yeah. It's true.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, everything you said is true in the sense of being a present, functional adult is hard.
Adulting.
Being a present, functional adult is really difficult. Trying to exceed and go above and beyond maybe some of the things that you experienced or didn't experience adds a layer to it. And as cliche as it is a matter of putting on your own mask first, kind of like we alluded to earlier. And so I think a lot of people dread that because where they are right now feels maybe so overwhelming. They're like, if I stop and focus on myself, I'll have to do this for forever. Like I'll never have time for anyone else.
Mhm.
And I tell people don't fall too far into the future. Worry about yourself right now and do it in small ways. Because I think a lot of people think extremes in their head and like, I'm gonna have to overhaul my life. I'm gonna have to cut everyone off. And sometimes I'm like, or it means just one time a week you'll tell somebody that you call them back and you expose yourself to what does that guilt feel like? Did it end the world? Did it end my relationship? Did it make me the worst cousin ever? And sometimes you get to poke holes in these prevailing ideas that are driving you at this
Mhm.
unrelenting pace.
So two things are coming to mind for me, and I'm going to try to tie them together because
Mhm.
um, I think about where I've struggled to show up in a relationship, and I'm stressed out, I'm unhappy, I feel like I'm doing everything I can to keep it together. I feel like I'm holding on
Mhm.
like the fingertips.
Right. By a thread, right?
And someone's like, well, just give me your hand, I'll help you. I was like, if I let go and you don't, like, I can't get to you before I'm going to fall off this cliff.
Mhm.
I know you want to help, but you can't help me because I can't reach. Like, I don't, like, it's just,
Mhm.
this is the best I can do right now. Like,
Yep.
hold on. Like, I'm holding on.
I'm holding on.
But then I recognize that's that's pulling us apart
Mhm.
and not bringing us together. And I feel like that's been hard.
Right. Would you characterize it though as believing they cannot help, or are you feeling as though the effort that it would take to accept the help or bring them in on the situation is too
Oh,
much?
sometimes
Okay.
one more than the other, sometimes all of them at the same time, and probably something I'm not thinking about right now.
Yeah. And I'll say this, it is risky to be vulnerable. It's risky to be in relationship. And so that's obviously everyone's in a different place there with things that they have to work out. But what I will say is that if I can kind of boil it down to you're someone I trust and you said you were going to try to help me, I'll even give you low hanging fruit. I'll give you something that you could drop and it'll be okay. Like as long as I wasn't having to carry it. And so I tell people if you're looking to practice vulnerability and trust, I know a lot of people that are like, well, somebody else could do it, but it's not really going to be the way that I want it. And then it's going to be more work and I'm going to have to explain it. Some of that is about control, right? Some of that is, I need you to do it exactly like I want it to be done, or else, you know what? Never mind. I'm too uncomfortable with that. I'll just do it myself. And I like to tell people the key is getting comfortable with discomfort. If you have a small task that you can give someone that maybe it'll be a little raggedy or a little a little less than your
Being not perfect.
typical stand, yeah. Again, putting down perfectionism, right? And realizing that it's about being, people hate this phrase. I know, like when I talk to people who are dealing with perfectionism, it's okay if it's good enough. And I want to make a small comment about good enough, meaning in psychology, there is a concept of the good enough mother. Meaning, in today's society, we think of like super mom, right? She has her own life, she's in her kids' life, she's at activities, she's doing it all, she looks good, all these things that are,
Oh, that was my
oh,
next question.
yeah,
Please understand. This is my
yeah,
next question.
a little bit of a unicorn lifestyle, but I'm not always against it. Um, but what I mean is, what a lot of research shows is that being present for your children, meaning interacting with them, taking care of their needs, you actually, I'm going to put a number on this because guys, don't quote me. You only need to interact with them, let's just say 40% of the time. 40%, which, okay, 40% of the time. You just need to be good enough. Everything else above that is extra and probably meaningful and fulfilling to your child. But the concept is, how do I reframe my standard at times to be good enough? Because as a perfectionist, if you're looking to constantly get 100, even if you get 90, all you do is mourn that little gap.
But
That,
people are so judgy that I brought the Kroger cake, or if I had time, the Publix cake, and I didn't make it
mhm,
myself. I think the other thing that is that you talk about trying to be all these things, but also, like I said, in the relationship, like, okay, I gotta be good mom, and I
mhm,
gotta be strong Black woman, and I got people depending on me. But at the same time, I gotta keep it tight, keep it right, or else my dude, or my partner is out the door. And so then it
mhm,
makes it harder to feel like, where is my space? You're telling me to practice vulnerability. Where does that
mhm.
space even exist?
Yeah. I mean, truthfully, what you're describing though, that's not quite being vulnerable with yourself because you are subscribing to lots of opinions and ideas outside of you. And I think the most vulnerable question is like, what do I want to be? And even if your answer truthfully is, I want to be all those things, then okay, we still gonna have to talk about that because it might not be reality. It might be an aspiration, right? And then even still reframing your standards is, okay, I want to be these 10 things, but I'm going to go hard for 3 of them. So I am going to practice maybe like physical movement, not so that so and so is out the door, because if they're out the door because I'm not working out, you could go. But I'm going to practice physical movement because it's important to me, right? I value it.
I
I
don't want the
think it's
sugar
important.
diabetes.
I want to be right. And even if it is, I want to be cute. Okay, that's a great byproduct of working out. But I think sometimes we have to ask that question of says who? Like you were saying, they, which I think is such an interesting word,
Oh,
because they represents this vague, nebulous, judging eye, right?
maybe real though.
Mhm. They are, but also sort of asking like, will this matter a week from now? Will this matter a month from now? Will this matter a year from now? But but totally, I think asking yourself, what was important to me? Like if let's I heard you mention bringing a cake instead of making it. If I committed to bringing something to my kid's school, my value is actually showing up for my kid. Y'all are welcome that I brought this from the store, but my value was to show up for my child. And so if buying a cake allowed me to do that, y'all are about to get this bought cake because I'm valuing my honor system, right? Not a judgmental system. It is very difficult to satisfy other people's perceptions because the bar is going to keep moving. Well, you made it, but did you make the frosting? Did
Okay.
you make it today or did you make it yesterday? Right. So that's just an insatiable pull.
Right. I think, you started off by talking about letting go of perfectionism and recognizing how, and I'm going to say it this way, how good enough is. Often our version of good enough is everyone else's great because we have held ourselves
Correct.
to these standards for so long.
Yes.
Where I had an ouch was when you started talking about the control and I needed just my way. And I guess I can recognize that's a form of medicating my own anxiety. Like I'll just do it myself because then I know
Hmm.
I ain't gonna have no issue.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whew. Um, so some of the letting go. But this last part, you said this at the beginning, and I feel like we're coming back to it now. Who whose message do we hear?
Yeah.
And the message we tell ourselves should be the most important one, but it should also be one that is kind. We are often, and sometimes it's
Yeah.
coming over stuff that maybe family members or I remember the first time the lady at my church at Vacation Bible School picnic said I had thunder thighs. I will never forget that.
Oh my
I hate
goodness.
wearing shorts to this day. Okay, but that's also, I recognize, not a reality. So what are some ways that we can maybe interrupt some of these negative messages that we've internalized
Yeah.
and turn them into our own voice when it really is
Uh-huh.
the they? I still
Yeah.
think they are real, but I'm hearing you. I'm
Yeah.
listening. I'm listening.
Yeah. No, you're right. So you're right. They can be an actual personification. They can be a societal standard. They can be something I imagined. And so it does exist in many forms. And sometimes I tell people to ask that exact question, like, according to who? Because there's a lot of things when we tend to think internally. I know we don't all have the same running dialogue, but most of the things we think are in our voice. And so they're valid and we believe them. We don't question them. I often tell people start to ask yourself, like, is that me talking or is that something else? Is that anxiety? Is that judgment? Or is that, I'm a psychologist, so of course I'm going to blame your mom. Is that my mom? But I think, realistically, sometimes I even have people, no joke, change the voice in their mind. Like make it a funny voice, make it a silly voice. I want you to start making that voice foreign because what you said is true. The most important voice is your own. But I want to make sure that voice is authentic to you and your values, not some sort of accumulation of distorted messages that you've picked up your whole life.
So we have some time left, and I feel like the chat has been popping, and people have actually been putting in. I want to thank everyone who's been along this journey, because I said, well, I'm going to put myself out there and be vulnerable. And this is recorded and everything. Ooh, I got to make sure nobody in the family sees this one. But I want to pause before we transition into the Q&A and allow people to ask you questions. And hopefully for everyone who's joined us, can you maybe just lead us through a couple of deep breathing exercises, just real quick, just to say,
Definitely. Just a little transitional moment. I agree. Okay, so when it comes to deep breathing, a lot of the times I tell people you need to practice deep breathing regularly. It is not something that you will probably be able to access in a crisis moment and do it well. And so when we're breathing deeply, I just want to sit here to get more comfortable wherever you are. If you're sitting in a chair, I would encourage you to have both feet on the floor and just start off doing what I discussed, which is like a body scan, and kind of start at the top of your head and move down and look for like places that you might feel stiff. Relax your jaw, relax your shoulders, feel the weight of your body in the chair or wherever you are. And when you're deep breathing, you want to imagine yourself filling your belly, not your chest, but filling your belly up with as much air as possible. And so when you breathe in, you want to breathe in deeply through your nose. So you want to take a breath in, fill your belly up as much as possible, almost like you're kind of faking a pregnant belly. You can hold it for a second and then blow all the air out of your mouth. You can also do a big exhale for those of you who do yoga practice, like a deep sigh. If you blow out, just imagine like blowing out a balloon. So we're going to do that together. Take your own pace. I'm just going to fill the space and talk to guide you. Again, keep your body relaxed. Deep breath in. Hold it. Fill your lungs up as much air as possible, your belly, and breathe out. The exhale is very important. You want to force the air out. Let's do that again. Breathe in and hold it, and then exhale. Let's do one more. On that last exhale, imagine all the stress melting out of your body. So you want to breathe in deeply. Hold it. If you're already there, feel free to exhale. Breathe out.
thank you for that.
Imagine, yeah, of course. That breathing is one of the most accessible and easy resets that you can do.
And
You
I will say
can
as a
do it
clinician,
anywhere. Yeah,
like you absolutely need oxygen to go inside of your body. And the only way to do that is to breathe. And
exactly.
that's what makes everything work. So this is not psychological. This is science. This is,
No, I agree.
it's how it works.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make one comment. I hope you'll understand. You talked about it melting away. If it's something, can I also throw it? Can I just throw it? Like,
Oh yeah,
I want it to
throw it into
melt.
the
I
sea.
literally want to just be like, be gone. Is
Yeah,
that okay? Do I have to
toss
calm,
it.
throw
You
it?
can mentally toss it.
Okay, awesome. Well, I don't think I see anything in the Q&A portion, but I do want to see, Marie, maybe you can help us, because like I said, the chat has been popping. If there are any questions that maybe we haven't touched on or things that we can highlight.
I think one of the questions would be, how do we distinguish between anxiety and depression?
Oh, that is a good question. So there can be overlap. Um, I'm trying to think. I want to be like clear. I like to kind of explain. So I did describe some of the symptoms of anxiety. Where that can overlap with depression are things like difficulty concentrating, irritability, etc. Um, there's a certain quality to depression that features, I would say, just more narrow negative thinking, prolonged exhaustion. Of course, one of the classic features are certain thoughts about maybe self-harm or ending your life. And so that, of course, is very serious. And if that's going on, I would encourage you to speak to someone sooner than later.
Well, also say
Um,
not
y-
just ending your life, but feeling like your life doesn't have value or meaning. Like
meaning,
I'm
yeah.
doing everything for everybody, but nobody cares about me.
hmm
And again,
Absolutely.
that's that negative kind of self.
Like a very narrow criticism. Yeah, like
Yeah.
defeated, hopelessness, I would say. I also want to
So hard,
point
it's never
out,
gonna get better.
yeah, and I also want to point out that, while anxiety tends to be more like sort of like kind of feeling on edge and this restlessness, um, anxiety, this is a very cliche phrase that I don't totally agree with, but I know some people say anxiety is more about living in the future, depression is more about living in the past. And that's not entirely true, but I do think that anxiety has a quality that's much more forward focused, um, and can also feel defeating. But, I think that there are also, again, a reputable quizzes online. I don't want to point you to a Facebook quiz, but there are also some reputable resources online. And just give me a second to maybe think of some. But even perhaps like I don't know if the AMA has anything, the Medical Association, but the American Psychological Association might have some quizzes that you can just do a brief questionnaire to see if you can distinguish anything between the two.
And I think that's the other thing is that you talked about sometimes you need to ask other people because you may not be able to see it in yourself because you've so disconnected from your body. Um, that irritability, I think in particular, a lot of people think irritability is anxiety, but a lot of times when you just ready to pop off on everybody, including your children that you love dearly, but
Yeah,
no
yeah.
matter what they do, they're working your last nerve. That's that kind of irritability. If you're, that could also be a sign of depression.
Yeah.
Because I don't
Yeah.
think, because we're like, I don't have time. I got too much to do. I don't have time to just lay around and do nothing. So we never even give ourselves time
Mhm.
to lean into the exhaustion, but it
Yeah.
shows up in other ways.
One of the other conversations in the chat was about guilt. At the point
Mhm.
where you guys were talking about saying, it's good enough. I'm going to bring the store-bought cake, or I'm going to, my house doesn't have to be perfect. One of our guest friends said, that's good enough makes me feel guilty.
Yeah.
How do we manage that guilt?
So guilt is an emotion that is really tricky and complex, I'll be honest. And I think one of the things that I said earlier was you have to inoculate yourself against guilt, meaning you have to experience it and expose yourself to it as nasty as it feels, as uncomfortable as it feels, to also see like what is the outcome here? Like what does the guilt materialize into? Was it just short-lived? Because I think sometimes we build up a lot around an emotion. Like I'm doing everything I can to avoid this emotional experience. And so I'm going to keep working because I don't want to feel guilty. But sometimes I do go through a course with some of my clients of like, no, girl, sit on that couch and feel guilty. And then let's see. Let's see. Like maybe you had to sit through a little bit of discomfort and the guilt to realize, you know what, sitting down is not that bad. It was bad for the first 30 minutes. Um, And so, sort of inoculating yourself again to those messages. Why do I feel guilty? Where did that come from? I, full transparency, I'm from a Caribbean background. There is no such thing as laying down all day. Like, why would you do that? Sitting down.
Are you ill?
Yeah. And now I can sit down. It took me some time, but I can do it through practice.
And I think the other thing is giving yourself permission, right? My feet
Yeah,
are swollen. My feet hurt. I'm going to sit down and put my feet up so that they aren't swollen because then it will be less painful because I'm now checked back into my body and this is my body saying you've gone past the point
correct.
where you
Mhm.
need to rest. And I
Mhm.
think that's that honoring that truth that so often we disconnect and rush through. Um,
Mm.
but it does feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate what you said about the exposure therapy. Um, we have a few minutes left, and I want to propose something and ask if this makes sense to you, Dr. Alicia.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about messaging and the things that we tell ourselves and what's true and what's not true. I wonder if people would be willing to write down some of the things that they say to themselves that is unkind. and maybe think of
Mhm.
one big thing, maybe it's 2 or 3 things, and then maybe give people a few seconds or so to do that. But then let's all challenge each other
Yeah,
to
to
think
find a
of
reframe.
to have a kind message in its place based off of what we know is true. We're not saying lie to yourself. If
No, that
if
doesn't work,
you
by the way.
if you are, you
So
can say all day long that you are a size 4. And if you are not a size 4,
Hmm.
that's not a helpful message.
Hmm.
how'd you
But
know that was my thing?
if you can say, you know what, I like this curve here. And I like the way when I put this blouse on, it makes the girls stand up a little nicer.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
okay, can we try that?
I think that's a good opportunity to reframe, and I'm happy to help anybody who
Okay.
might
So
feel stuck
maybe
on it.
we'll take, I'll give us a timer because I don't want us to go too far down and thinking about all our negative messages. But why don't we take 30 seconds and
Hmm.
just think of a couple of things, write them down. So
Yeah,
on your mark,
and
get
I
set,
see
go.
some people in the chat, and I'm happy to start
Ooh, yeah.
addressing them when they come in.
Mhm.
So someone mentioned you could be doing more, which is the ultimate, right? Because here's the thing,
I'm gonna
you
need Cherie
could.
not to write
Yeah,
down what I was need to
yeah,
write down.
you could. You could. And so, like, let's just even start there. Like, you could, and what is my capacity, not my capability? My
Mm.
capability might be I could stay up all night and clean up my whole house and somebody else's house and organize all my stuff. What is my capacity? And so that can set a more tangible goal. Or here's what I've already done. Instead of focusing on what could be, here's what I've done today. Because a lot of people are surprised. There's a list. And even if it's only
Oh,
one thing, that might have been a big thing or a hard thing. And
yeah.
so instead of being future focused, ask yourself, what did I already do? What is instead of what if?
So I'm not gonna put Cherise on the spot because I appreciate her, like I said, calling me out. Because I cannot tell you, I'm gonna be doing more after this webinar is over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so maybe for someone, maybe give people a few seconds to kind of think about whatever they wrote down. What's a reframe? If I could be doing more, what did I get done today? I love what you said about what is my capacity. My capacity, I need to sleep. I need to eat. I need to. These are needs.
Hmm.
Now, what is left over after those things are done? And that's it. That's my capacity.
Yeah.
I think Karen makes a good point. She says we all need our help moment. Remember the movie The Help, where you is kind, you is strong, and you is important. And often we do a
Exactly.
smile when we say that, but those affirmations are critical.
But that's the thing. I think
Very.
you have to have the one that's mine. I know I have I have several aunts, but I have one auntie that's my girl. And she, to me, is the role model for the auntie that I want to be because my mom and I are close. My mom, sometimes she gets a little like, you over to your auntie's house? But I appreciate my auntie and I appreciate that I'm able to model that in terms of the auntie I want to be. And so even if I don't get everything else right, like that's my kind moment. Like I love
Mhm.
the relationship that I'm developing with my littles, as I refer to them.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah. I
So I
think
don't know.
self-affirmation and self-talk is really important because I think also as we review the negative messages that came so easily to us, it's the frequency of that. Are you
Mhm.
saying that to yourself often? Like, I think the hard part about stress and perfectionism is there's a lot of insidious messages floating around inside of you that you are not aware of that are pushing you, that are hanging those things over you that it once worked for you. When you were like 6 and you were like, run faster, you're so slow. And then you ran faster and you were like, yes, this is the way that I should encourage myself.
Mm.
That
It's okay to
that
learn new messages. Yes.
that gets to a threshold where you're actually just beating yourself up and it's not producing anything.
So I love the comment from Morgan. And I realized that we are at time, and I felt like we were just getting to the good part. We have to invite you back. So I'm going to read this out for everyone. You know,
Okay.
Morgan gave us a beautiful transition reframe. I went from saying, I feel I'm not present enough for everyone else, to I am giving what I can without overpouring from my cup. And I think it goes back to what you said, Dr. Alicia, is that the repetition, every time we hear that I'm not present enough, immediately follow it with, that's not true. This is
Yeah.
what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So the last thing that I will say to all of you is thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for being so active and engaged in this conversation. In addition to repetition, find an accountability partner. Because
Yeah.
I've already told you, I forget all this stuff that I said and I know better. But I have found it helps. Even today, someone was like, I haven't heard from you in a couple of days. I'm concerned. Thank you for reminding me that I wasn't in touch. I've been really stressed about work. I appreciate that you did it in such a way of concern that was loving and kind. It allows me to remember this work, they gonna step right over my dead body
Mhm.
and keep it pushing. But our relationships matter and how we treat
Yeah.
ourselves matters.
Exactly.
Thank
Exactly.
you so
Yeah.
much for this amazing time talking with you this evening.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for participating and sharing your feedback. And as you guys can imagine, I love, love, love sharing this information and talking to you. So happy to stay connected and looking forward to talking with you more. Maybe we'll have to bring our conversation back. Clearly, I appreciate everyone for the great comments.
Definitely. Thank you, everyone. We'll send the recording when it's available tomorrow. And we'll include the hot link to Dr. Alicia's website, so you can stay in touch with her. And we will try to convince her to come back for a part two. I think there's a lot of angst for a lot of people right now for a variety of reasons. So we may need a monthly reminder or something. Last thing I would share is if you, and I'll drop it in the email, there was a recent quote by Shonda Rhimes when she was accepting some doctorate or whatever. And she basically said, you can't be 100% in every capacity of your life. If I'm writing an award-winning show, then that means I'm not at my kid's school. Or if I'm at my kid's school, then I'm not meeting with the producer. If I'm not, meeting with the producer, then I may be, off writing that award-winning show. And I think that was so impactful because we
Mhm.
have been led to believe that you've got to be all things to everyone all the time. So,
Yeah.
with that said, I will wish you all a good evening. Grab you a cocktail or whatever and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you so much, Dr. Alicia. Thank you, Dr. V.
Thank you.
Look for our workshops in February. We're going to be talking about heart health in a variety of capacities. And don't forget Black Maternal Health Week in April. We'll have our virtual maternal health fair, and we already have some amazing workshops on queue. So block your calendar. You will not want to miss these things.
April 11th through the 17th.
Yes, April 11th through the
Hey.
17th. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
I know.